Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society. On behalf of our founding artistic director, Tony Czechia, and our executive director, Philip Manival, my name is Miles. I'm the artistic director. It is a great pleasure to have those of you joining us in the hall and those of you joining us online as well for a wonderfully put together program called Danika the Rose. This is a program that was brought to us by Jazimina MacNeil, who's featured in the program today, our mezzo, along with soprano Sarah Shafer, pianist Jonathan Ware. We have two actors joining us this afternoon, Odds Bodkin and Brett Ashley Robinson, as well as visual art from two of our other friends, Jazimina de Leon and Noah MacNeil. We're going to turn things over to all of those wonderful people in just a few minutes. Before we do that, we're going to have our usual introductions. We want to welcome all of you who are joining us for the very first time this afternoon. We say welcome to the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society, or PCMS as we say informally. We want to welcome you also to this wonderful space. This is Benjamin Franklin Hall. It's the home hall of the American Philosophical Society. In normal times, we'd have about a third of our season here. We'd have full audiences. This season, we've been here the entire time. We've been loving it. Very fortunate to be in this beautifully intimate venue. But we really only have been averaging about 30 or so patrons per concert as we remain socially distanced and responsible and safe. And we'll do that for the remainder of this season, which is about one more week. And then hopefully by next season, we'll be back to what I would like to call normal, whatever we interpret normal these days. But for today, let's talk to all of you who are joining us online. There are many more of you than those here in the hall. And you'll maybe watching through three different platforms. We have our website, our YouTube page, and our Facebook page. On all three of those platforms, we have a live chat function, and that live chat function is there for you. So feel free to reach out and start a dialogue with us. We have a trio of staff members that are working the back ends of those platforms. They've done it all season, so we say a big thank you to Michelle Shirk, Brian Potter, and Marina Weber. But you can also reach out and just have a dialogue with other people that are watching as well. Whatever is your preference, the live chat function is there for you. Good news is after this afternoon's performance concludes, there's another 72 hours, 3 more days for you to listen again, which we hope you want to do, or tell a friend, either way. And as we've discussed all season, the only area in Benjamin Franklin Hall where a mask is optional is on the stage that I'm standing. And we have done that to give our artists some flexibility. Everywhere else in the hall, our patrons, our staff, the artists backstage, they're all wearing their masks, and we're wearing them properly, covering our nose and our mouth at all times. We're going to talk a little bit about support and donations, highlight a few key donors, and then I promise you we'll turn things over to Danika the Rose and this fantastic program. As it would seem obvious to all of you who have watched throughout the season, when you're only averaging about 30 patrons per concert in the auditorium, you're not making a lot of box office income. So that's pretty obvious. But the silver lining to all of this is that we've asked our online audience to donate throughout the season, and time and again you have risen to that challenge. So we ask all of you again who are watching online today to consider a donation to help support PCMS as we conclude this season and as we look towards next season when we look to continue live streaming our events here at the Philosophical Society. Remember, as you watch today, whether it's on our website or our YouTube or our Facebook page, if you scroll down, you'll see a donation section, and there are several categories there. You may give in any of those categories, but I circled the $25 category because that's what you would pay if you were in the hall today. Also remember that when you have a program like this with as many artists that are involved, the key for us was to make sure that we maintained what we had originally promised them, which is to pay them their originally negotiated contracts. We also did that with our hall, and we've done that with our staff in terms of not having to make any salary cuts. The only way we've been able to do that is through your support. So please do consider a donation today. We would be most appreciative. Now, let's think. Oh yes, other people that we want to thank that have risen above and beyond. We start with Dr. Susan Giesecke-Bloom and A. Charles Winkleman, along with the Presser Foundation. All of our live stream equipment that we have, they've helped to upgrade it not once but twice this season. We also want to thank two people here at the Philosophical Society for their unwavering support. Executive Officer Robert Hauser and Director of Meetings Annie Westcott. We could not be doing what we're doing without them for sure. And we want to thank our audio and video engineers who are fantastic. Always on audio, Noriko Okabe. On video, Matt Genders. Our production manager, Jody Lee, has the day off, so I'll do some double duty today. But the whole team is led by Eric Peterson, who's back with us. We thank all of them for their tireless work all the time. Now, here in the hall, ladies and gentlemen, this is my cell phone here in my right hand. This pertains to you. Please take a moment now to make sure your cell phones are silenced, as I've done, or muted, whatever it is, so they make no noise during this fantastic program. Again, on behalf of everyone at the Chamber Music Society, we could not be happier to have you joining us here in the hall and online. Without any further ado, please help me welcome to the stage Danika the Rose. Thank you.
Danika the Rose, Antonín Dvořák's Moravian duets in a duet with a fairy tale. In a land of vineyards, fields, and forests, along the Danube River, there once lived a girl the villagers called Danika the Rose. Unlike other girls, instead of gossiping after the day's chores, Danika preferred to pick a red rose and stroll by herself out to the meadow. Soon deer would step from the forest's edge to nibble bunches of clover from her hand. The birds loved her too, and when a certain cuckoo landed on her shoulders, she fed him from a pouch full of seeds. Wise in the ways of animals and plants, Danika preferred their quiet spirits to those of chatty people. Past the vineyards and meadows rose Duke Maximilian's castle. She'd only seen the landlord once as he'd ridden past with guards and a pack of hunting hounds. She'd pulled her scarf down low to hide her face, for Danika was very beautiful, and he, she'd heard, had an eye for girls' skirts and was used to getting his way. But that was so unlike Dano, the Duke's quiet gamekeeper, who appeared at the forest's edge each day with a deer over his shoulders. Clad in leathers, he was sinewy, with dark eyes that had never once looked her way. She found herself wondering about him and called him Dano the Arrow, because she'd heard he'd rid the forest of marauding bears and wolves with his bow, and that he never missed. One summer day, Dano the Arrow stepped out of the forest, quite close to her. Despite the deer on his shoulders, he bowed and she blushed.
"You do not hunt with the hounds like the Duke, sir," she observed. "Isn't it easier that way?"
"I don't like hunting with hounds," he replied, smiling at the bird on her shoulder. "They frighten the deer too much.
But you shoot them anyway.
But I don't frighten them. I am silent. My arrow never misses their hearts. One moment they're alive, the next they're not. No time to be frightened.
Oh, I see, she said, thinking about that.
He set the deer down and cut off a fine strip of venison, offering it.
Isn't that for the Duke? She asked, knowing the poaching laws.
No, it's for me. I keep his game keeps me fed. It's mine to give as I wish.
What is your name? She asked, although she already knew it.
Dano.
I am Danika.
I am happy to meet you, Danika, he said, hefting the deer and heading toward the castle. It came to pass that he cut strips for her basket often that summer, never asking for anything in return. Unlike the brash boys of the village, Dano was calm and made her laugh with his fine wit, especially when he showed her his hut in the forest and called it his castle. After they'd talked and laughed in the sun many times, one day Dano told her she was beautiful. Never once had he mentioned it before. But Danika's mother knew how beautiful her daughter was too, and believed that if the Duke saw her but once, he'd be smitten. The next day, as Dano knelt to cut Danika's strips, he looked into her eyes. I have fallen in love with you, Danika. Would you become my wife?
And in that moment, she knew she'd already given her heart to him. He was kind and strong. To live deep in the woods with Dano the arrow, far from people's eyes, would be wonderful.
Just then, Duke Maximilian and his men galloped onto the meadow. The Duke drew up his horse and stared at Danika in a way she did not like. Who might this be, Dano, my gamekeeper? The Duke asked. This is Danika of the village, Lord. Is she your wife? No, Lord. Well, Danika, never have I seen you before, for surely I'd remember. You must come visit me sometime. The Duke laughed, and they all rode off. Come, let us go. Dano's eyes were like flint. But when they asked Danika's parents for permission to marry, her mother turned to Danika. Has the Duke ever seen you?
Head down, Danika nodded. Just today, he did. I do not like him.
Her mother scowled at Dano, and her father folded his arms. Danika, you cannot marry this lowly woodsy man. Dano nodded sadly. Danika, I'm sorry, I should have known. You were too beautiful to be caged by my simple life.
No, she cried. Mother! Father! Father!
Forget him, barked her father. A cuckoo will sing at Christmas before you wed this man. Despite her parents' words, the next day she waited for Dano in the meadow with a green handkerchief, one she'd embroidered with a crimson rose. He stepped from the trees and hesitated.
Would he not speak to her?
Behind her, the Duke galloped along the path, flanked by soldiers dressed in the purple and yellow livery of the king.
She'd heard the king was fighting a war far away at the sea. What did these men want?
You, Dano the gamekeeper, are hereby conscripted for 3 years as an archer in the king's war,
The lieutenant proclaimed from his horse.
No, she cried at the Duke. Did you do this?
As I asked before, are you married to this man?
Cheeks flushing hot, she shook her head.
The Duke and the soldiers all rode off. Dano hung his head.
Don't do it, she cried, hugging him close.
I cannot refuse a royal order. If I do, I'll hang. You know that.
3 years? Far away? In danger? No, Dano.
If I can't marry you, I might as well die.
No.
Danika, my rose, he said, smelling the handkerchief and touching her cheek. I will keep you here in my heart. I will keep this. I must say farewell to my mother.
She watched him walk into the forest, and her heart broke. Dano, she whispered and wept. alone in her meadow.
The next day, Maximilian rode up to Danika in the vineyard and told her to take off her scarf.
You are a very beautiful woman, he said, leaning over his saddle. And I would wish to know you better.
She tried to walk away.
Oh, don't go, please. Why have I been rude? Lady, please forgive me.
Please, Lord, I have given my heart to Dano, your gamekeeper. I will wait for him.
He will never come back, Danika. And what will happen to you then?
But Lord, how can you want me? I am poor.
That night, the Duke came to her parents' house with his men.
Your daughter's been stealing grapes from my vineyard. I saw her there today.
Danika had stolen no grapes. Mother, that's not true.
Stealing from the Duke is a grave offense. However, I'm willing to forgive your daughter because I have fallen in love with her.
How could the Duke love her? She wondered. They'd only spoken twice.
Oh, Lord, you have our permission, crowed her mother. Danika, you will become a duchess.
Danika felt imprisoned by her parents' hopes. Dano was gone. Who wouldn't be honored by such a proposal? She said, hiding her true feelings.
Come then to my castle. Until you say you love me, you are simply my guest.
Far down the Danube at the sea, Dano loosed an arrow, and far behind enemy lines, another general fell from his horse, pierced through his heart. Deer he did not mind shooting, they were food. But this awful work confounded him. At night he slept on the ground after his meal of army bread and water, and held Danika's rose handkerchief, dreaming of her. Three long years lay before him, but if he survived, he'd return and marry her, with or without her parents' permission.
Why does she not love me already?
Maximilian asked his privy councillor.
Lord, she is a young girl. Give her more time. More time? She's been here all summer and fall. Just yesterday I gave her another gown. All she wants to do is pick a rose each day and take it to her room. Oh, she's no doubt overwhelmed by your magnificence, Lord. I'm sure she's falling in love with you.
Divina cosa la proscena, divina votata. Co by ona drobna nie telingu, co by ona szukała. A szukaj, drobna nie telingu, a szukaj, drobna nie
Winter passed, and Danika remained maddeningly polite. She smiled at Maximilian, but her heart remained far away.
A year, and still all she does is dream of a deer hunter, I fumed one day
as Danika stood at the meadow's edge, feeding fawns.
Deer hunters impress you still, I see. Dano provided but one deer a day. Pathetic. I'll show you how deer hunting is done.
The Duke's hounds bounded off, and the deer fled into the forest. That afternoon he returned, the wagon piled high with dead stags, does, even fawns, their throats torn away by the dogs.
Fawns, she thought. Why kill them?
Danika, what do you think of my magnificent hunt? He asked, exhausted but proud. Surely this would impress her.
So many, my lord, she replied, choking back her sorrow. Why so many?
Deflated, he sat back in his saddle.
I thought you liked venison.
I do, Lord, I do, but how will we eat all of this before it rots?
He scowled.
Unless, she quickly added, it is your intention to hold a feast for your servants and the entire village. Many have never tasted venison. They will love you for it.
He thought about that and scowled again.
No, they'll just get a taste for it and end up poaching my lands. Another suggestion.
How did this man's mind work? Could she ever love Maximilian? Every time she tried, he said things like this. She cast about for an answer and then said, "Were you thinking of sausages? Dry sausages, smoked. A winter's supply?"
He brightened.
Yes, venison sausages. My, you are clever.
But those sausages would be their only venison that winter. For the next day, the remaining deer fled the Duke's lands, swimming across the Danube to the far shore. And with no deer to graze on the briars the following spring, the tender shoots became a thicket of brambles, choking the fields and meadows. No matter what the Duke tried, chopping, burning, the briars grew. Without the persistent teeth of deer, Danika knew their horns would harden into long, black knives. One evening, the Duke shouted out,
I'm tired of sausages. Bring me mutton from the village. Oh, Lord, there is no more mutton. The pastures are overrun with briars. Pork, then. Lord, the villagers slaughtered their pigs long ago. They are going hungry.
A flock of geese flew by the window.
Fowl, then. Let it be known that any villager who brings me a bird will be welcome to the scraps from the kitchen.
At dinner that night, the cloche revealed a pile of mixed fried birds. The Duke scraped the little ones aside, revealing a very large fried bird beneath.
What's this one? An eagle, my lord, shot in her nest by the river. I'll have her.
My lord, will you excuse me? Danika asked, rising, feeling sickened. I wish to retire for the evening. With a little stumble, she left, heading up the staircase.
Dabbing his napkin, he spoke under his breath.
High and mighty are we. Deer, birds, either way, Danika, you nibble upon your friends.
The next morning, when Danika opened her balcony doors, something was missing. Listening intently, she heard a strangely silent world. No bird song.
God save us, she gasped.
All the surviving birds had left, and a giant silver cloud was puffing over the forest from the river. When she saw what it was, she trembled and stepped inside, closing her doors. As they struck the glass, they pattered like rain. Mayflies. With no birds to eat them, the swarm enveloped the castle and the village like a blizzard. She ran down the stairs. Thick clouds were pouring in the tall windows as servants raced to shut them. Breathing hard, some inhaled the insects and coughed, almost choking. The next day, she saw villagers walking to the graveyard through an inch-deep carpet of insects carrying tiny coffins.
What is this? Danika asked a kitchen maid she'd known in the village.
They died in their cribs by the windows, miss. Choked on the flies.
Was this her fault? Danika wondered. If she gave up and married Maximilian, would it end this madness? Was this guilt the price of her love?
Another autumn, and still she dreams of him, Maximilian mused darkly one night. Come spring, Dano's 3 years would end. If he were alive, he'd return, and Danika would be free to marry him. Unless... The Duke had a thought.
Sad news, he told her at dinner. Word has come to me that our gamekeeper has fallen in the war.
Dano? She gasped in horror.
Yes, shot through his heart with someone else's arrows, sadly.
Rising, she grabbed her rose. I cannot. Bursting into tears, she ran from the room.
Good, he thought. Cry yourself to sleep. Now there is only one man in your life, not two.
Danika fell upon her bed, lost in a swirling dream. She found herself upon a phantom ship built of 1,000 bows and arrows, sailing for a distant land. The war was here, she knew. Opening her hand, she found it was empty. Something should have been there. A golden ring. Why was she missing a golden ring? Then she knew. It was her wedding ring, the one her mother had locked away in a chest of greed, the ring meant for her and Dano. Suddenly, in the dream, she turned into a pale cuckoo and skimmed the treetops, joined by others with transparent wings.
The king's army is this way, Danika.
She could hear their voices distinctly.
All is not what it seems.
In an encampment below, she caught a flash of green and red. It was Dano by a fire, holding her handkerchief. Madly, she fluttered before him, but he didn't see her.
Ah, she thought. I am but a dream bird, but my Dano is not a dream. He is real. Is he alive? She asked the circling cuckoos.
Yes, he is. Your duke has told you a cruel and heartless lie.
Rai, musica, rai, sera luna. Rai, musica, rai, sera luna.
She awoke and stormed down the wide, curving stairs just as Maximilian emerged from his library.
You lied to me, she screamed, beating his fist on his chest. He's alive, isn't he?
What are you doing? He cried, restraining her wrists.
He is sitting by a fire. He has not been killed.
How can you know this? You're mad. He is at the sea. He is
here, she cried, pounding her heart. A place you will never be, for it is you who are mad. Mad with only thinking of yourself. Mad and blind and cruel.
A dark fury swept his brow. Waldo, summon the guards! He pointed around his hall. All this could have been yours, but instead you insult me at every turn, and now you have struck me. I, the Duke! Take her to the tower! The heavy oaken door slammed behind her. What place was this? Stone walls, just a straw bed and a table, a coarsely hewn stool, and a chamber pot.
She ran to the door and banged. You can't put me in here! You can't! But then she understood that without a doubt, they could. They could do anything they wanted.
Winter came, and she shivered in her gown, wrapped in woolen blankets. To fight the bitter cold, she burned wood in the lonely fireplace. The jailer pitied her, and so brought her cloth, needle, and thread to help her pass the endless hours. Although her hands were cold, she worked to remind herself of her former life. Slowly, carefully, she began to embroider a green handkerchief with a crimson rose. The pale cuckoos in her dream had told her the truth. Dano was indeed alive and well, warming his hands at a campfire in the forest by the sea. After each battle, he thanked God for preserving his life and brought out Danika's handkerchief, longing for her and aching with grief. He imagined the two of them walking together in the orchard and plucking an apple for her, just to watch her eyes light up and revel in her sweet smile. It was a fading daydream, however, here in the snow. winter passed, and there came a day when Danika let her fire go out and opened her casement. A warm spring breeze blew into the room. To her astonishment, a swallow landed on her windowsill. Had the birds returned?
Hello, she said.
It answered and hopped onto her hand.
Oh my! Who are you? Will you stay with me? I'm lonely. So lonely. She fed him a piece of stale bread and he flew inside, settling on her straw bed. Well, well, we shall be friends.
Remembering the strange, clear voices of the cuckoos in her dream, slowly and carefully, she taught him a little bit of human speech.
Love. Dano. Castle. Prison. No, prison. Good. Very good. My, you are a smart one. Now, fly away. The jailer will come soon.
When he came in with her mush and water, she asked her daily question.
What news of the king's war?
The war! Girl, the king has triumphed. The soldiers are coming home.
Fly down the river and find a man who has one of these, she told the swallow, holding the handkerchief she'd finished, just like the one she'd given to Dano. Give him this and tell him these words. Dano, my love, the Duke has imprisoned me. Help me if you still love me, but beware. He wants me for his wife.
Dressed in his leathers once again, Dano rode along the river path. As always, he wore Danika's handkerchief around his neck. Crossing into the Duke's lands, something caught his eye out on the Danube. Deer were swimming this way from the far shore, many hundreds of them. Above their antlers, eagles were soaring past, low above the water. Adding to his astonishment, a swallow landed on his horse's head, holding a handkerchief just like his own. Chirped the bird. For his wife. Dano kicked his horse to an urgent gallop.
Lord, he is but one man, Waldo soothed.
Yes, and a dead one. When he appears, loose the dogs to kill him. For it is you who are mad. Mad with thinking only of yourself. Mad and blind and cruel. Danika's words burned in his mind. Winter in the tower had been her last chance to be tamed, to take back her words and beg to be his wife. Instead, for 3 years, all she'd done was dishonor him with cold, haughty silence, luring him along with a smile here and there, and never letting him touch her, not even once. The little peasant! And Waldo, be sure our pretty prisoner doesn't survive the day either.
Oh, agreed. Let her go. She'll just brag to the village how she laughed at you for 3 years.
Laughed at me.
Or perhaps she felt so ashamed she jumped out her own window.
Bring the guards. I'll throw her out myself. A flock of cuckoos swooped into Danika's window.
The Duke is coming to kill you! You must escape!
A fear swept her. How? She said, looking down. It's too far.
Throw a blanket out your window!
What could cuckoos do with a blanket?
Yet she took one and pushed it out. In a moment it reappeared, its corners outstretched by 4 golden eagles. A commotion rang outside her door. Open it! The jailer turned the lock.
Oh, even if I die, Dano, I will always be yours.
As the door burst open, she leapt out the window onto the blanket. The mighty birds pulled her away from the tower as the Duke reached and grabbed for her, staring in disbelief. But he missed.
As if on a magic carpet, she saw the blue sky above her and felt the warm sun. She was free. She saw it, Dano's hut. Down there! The eagle swooped and set her on the ground. Thank you, she cried, as the deer galloped in from the woods. You have returned as well. Oh, how I have missed you.
Dano's hut was empty.
Where is he? She asked the cuckoos, still fluttering their gray wings.
He rides at full speed for the castle.
Oh no! He does not know I've escaped. They will kill him.
On leashes, the mastiffs dragged their pages' heels in the dirt, sensing blood. A page let each dog sniff one of Danika's blankets. "To the forest!" the Duke commanded from his horse. "Find her!" All his guards, 30 men, ran behind him as he rode down the castle path to the meadow. The briars, now long black daggers, pointed at the sky. They grew close on either side. Emerging into the open, the pages were about to release the dogs when Dano galloped from the trees and stopped.
"Ah, look! The lowly gamekeeper returns!"
"Where's Danika?" He unstrapped his bow and quiver. "You have imprisoned her?"
"And this is news? Did you enjoy the war?"
"No. What have you done?"
"Question me not so boldly, peasant. I've killed men for less than that."
"And I've killed many for no reason at all. Free her." He set an arrow to his bowstring.
"Can you kill all my hounds before they tear you from your saddle? How many arrows do you have?"
He looked down at his pages.
"Loose them!"
The hounds broke free and ran at Dano. He did not mind dying. He had faced it every day in the war. But before he did, his arrow would find Maximilian's heart.
Danika ran out from the trees, flanked by 100 stags. She stared as the briars grew together thickly, sealing off the castle's path retreat. In their blind fury, none of the men noticed. She turned to the stag nearest her and whispered a command. The stag stamped, tossed his antlers in agreement.
What was that thunder? Dano whirled around to see 100 stags charging across the open behind him, their antlers low to the ground.
Dano!
Danika stood at the forest's edge. Birds hovered around her. In an instant, the stags swept past him on either side and sent the dogs squealing, tails tucked, running for cover. In terror, the Duke reared his horse, twisting its neck back toward the castle. The beast lunged a few steps and jerked to a stop at the briar's edge, tumbling Maximilian over its head. Down upon the black knives he fell. For a moment he quivered and stared at the bloody thorns that now jutted from his throat and chest. Onward into the pages and guards charged the stags, hurtling them onto the black knives as well. Dano lowered his bow and galloped to Danika, leapt down, and took her in his arms. When the king received word that Maximilian and his men had tried to kill Dano the arrow and the girl he loved, but instead the Duke had perished in an attack by wild animals, he shrugged, as kings often do, at the loss of a landlord he'd never respected. Dano was far nobler, And more than anything else, Dano's arrows had helped him win his war. He sent word to the couple that if they wanted it, the duchy along the Danube now belonged to them. Knowing there was work to be done to heal the land and its people, the peasant girl and gamekeeper accepted.
Slowly and steadily, all spring and summer, the deer nibbled away at the cruel briars until they were gone. The birds feasted on the mayflies, and the villagers returned to their fields and pastures, rejoicing in a bountiful harvest. When the cool autumn breezes came, the birds left their forest perches and flew south.
All except one, Danika's favorite cuckoo, the one who liked to perch on her shoulder. Instead of leaving, he flew into a cage and was content to live there, even as the snows fell. And when Danika the Rose married Dano the Arrow and became his duchess on Christmas Day,
And he became her duke,
to everyone's delight,
the cuckoos sang.
Thank you.